everybody, I am Marley Bird and this is video 2 of the Nordic knit pullover. This is a 5-video series that I am doing right here with Yarnspirations to show you how to make this fantastic sweater. This is a bottom-up yoke sweater with some stranded knitting mixed in. In video 1, we learned how to cast on our stitches and work that broken rib pattern and how to carry our yarn in both hands, so with one color in each hand, or by dropping a color and picking up the next. It's called stranded knitting. Your homework from the last video was to complete the bottom portion of your sweater and the bottom portion of your sleeves. The instructions that we're following along are free and available at yarnspirations.com. You can find the link to that in the video description box right down there below. There's also a link to video 1 if you have not watched that yet. It is important that you have completed the video 1 homework before moving on. Don't worry, it won't take you super long. Just go back, watch that video, get your homework done, and you'll be caught up in no time. For everybody else, let's go ahead and take a look at your homework and the pattern. So down here, I've kind of a little bit slow on my homework. I only have one of the sleeve portions complete, but I do have the bottom portion of my sweater complete, and I've worked a couple of extra rows extra going into this week just to check on all the instructions that I'm going to show you. But mine is looking really good so far. I'm using a charcoal sort of gray color and then the mustard yellow, and I love the two together. So I'm gonna kind of push those aside and bring in the instructions. Now I do have some notes over here, so ignore those for right now. But this was your homework. It was this section right here and this section right here doubled because we have 2 sleeves. It's at this point that we are going to work this section right here and this section right here for the homework in this video. We're going to work on the homework from last week, so we're going to carry on onto those homework. The great thing is that this week's video is a lot of stockinette stitches, so no more stranded fair isle, which means it will go faster for you. Having said that, you need to be very conscientious of your gauge and make sure that you don't accidentally start knitting a little bit tighter than what your fair isle or stranded knitting gauge was. Otherwise, it'll look like your stranded knitting portion kind of poofs out a little bit more than your stockinette portion. We will combat that by changing needle sizes as we look at this in a second, but it is important for you to note that you make sure as you're knitting along, you don't start to get too comfortable and start to knit too tight or too loose, okay? You wanna make sure your gauge is consistent. So right down here, this part of the instructions, this is an extension of the body. So let's take a look at this first. And I'm going to continue my little box here, just like I did in the last video. So we're going to work on this. First thing we're going to do is change to smaller needles. And why change? Why are we going to do that? Well, part of that reason is exactly what I just mentioned about keeping gauge. On the next round, using our main color only, we will be only using our main color for this entire section. We want to decrease either 6 or 4 stitches depending on the size you're making. We're decreasing those stitches to get the stitch and gauge and everything correct past that stranded knitting. So decreasing, it's as simple as knit 2 together. And again, it doesn't tell you exactly where to do your decreases. It just says evenly around. So you can take the total number of stitches that you have on your needles, which would be right here, and you could divide that by either 6 or 4 and decide where you want to put your knit 2 togethers at those points. That makes sense? Pretty easy stuff. You should know how to do a knit 2 together. Once you've done that decrease round, it says you were going to knit in rounds until the work from the beginning measures 15 inches, or 16 and a half inches, 16 and a half, or 15 inches. This is important because when I talk about at the beginning measures, she's talking, the designer, she's talking about including this 3 inches that we have down here with our ribbing. Okay, so including our 3 inches with our ribbing and including all of the stranded knitting we did, we want to work up until this portion of the body of our sweater measures either 15 inches or 16.5 inches. You'll notice that right here I said need length. This is where you're going to add extra length to your sweater. So if you're somebody who's like, you know what, I really just want to add a little bit more length to my sweater or to my sleeves, this is where you want to do it. We want to do it before we get to the armholes, okay? How much length do you want to add? That is totally up to you, but I do want to caution you of this. Let's take a look at the schematic here. You can see here on the schematic, right over here on the side, those numbers there where it shows the depth of the yoke. That is how long your yoke depth is from your highest shoulder point. So if you are to take a tape measure and measure, have somebody else help you with this, but measure from your highest shoulder point all the way down to your armpit and see what that measurement is. So for me, it's 13 inches, but my piece that I'm making, remember I'm making the purple one or the 2X, 3X, it's 15 inches. That means my yoke is going to drop down approximately 2 inches deeper than my typical armhole. It's a very deep yoke. And you can see that even right down here on the piece, you can see how deep this yoke is before the armholes right down there. So I do want to caution you, adding the length here doesn't necessarily mean it's length from the bottom of your armhole of what your natural armhole is. It's the length added to what your yoke measurement is going to be also. So for me, if my total length here is supposed to be, is it 15? I think it's 15. I have to go back. Yes, 15. So if my total length from the armhole on the sweater to the bottom is supposed to be 15 inches, and let's say I add 2 inches, so we make it 17, and then I'm adding 15 inches of the yoke, so that gives me a 32-inch total length of my sweater. So then I could say from the highest shoulder point on my body and drop it down 32 inches, how long is my sweater going to be? Also, remember that that extra 2 inches deeper from your armhole where it naturally would be, it's going to add a little bit of extra there too. So adding extra length might not really be what you want, but if you disagree with me and you want to add length, this is where you would want to do it. It would be in this knit section where you're knitting just in plain rounds, okay? And that also goes for the sleeves. Let's take a look at those instructions now too. For the sleeves, we will change to a smaller pair of needles, just like we did before, only this time we're going to increase instead of decreasing because we're going from the smaller circumference of the cuff to the larger circumference of the upper arm. Now, the instructions say we're supposed to increase at the beginning and the end of either the 9th, 7th, or 3rd round to start, and then every following 10th, 8th, 6th, or 4th round after that until we get up to the number of stitches indicated for the size you're making. So on the first round, you are going to do it on the 9th or the 7th or the 3rd, depending on your size. But then every round after that, you'll do it in the following 10th round, 8th round, 6th round, or 4th round. And you continue doing that until you get up to your number of stitches, okay? Then you will continue working evenly, which means no increases, just plain stockinette in the round, which is knitting, until the beginning measures 16 inches or 15.5 inches or 14.5 inches, depending on the size. Again, if you want to add length, it is at this part you will add length. You will just go further than those measurements if you feel like you need to. But again, I want to caution you, take a look at the schematic and see if the schematic works already as is, or if you really do need to add the extra length, okay? Once you've done that, then it says next round, you are going to knit 38 or 40, 44, 46, 50, or 56, and then you will slip the last 2, 3, or 4 stitches and the first 2, 3, or 4 stitches of the round onto a stitch holder for the underarm. Repeat from star once. what you're doing is you're creating a space for us to then join the sleeve to the underarm of the body. You will notice that over here, you do the same thing, says next round, knit 55, 60, 65, 72, 80, or 90, slip the last 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 stitches onto a length of yarn for the underarm, repeat from star once. So these 2 rounds here, you're prepping your work to move on to the yoke. So it's a big, big prep step. We will get to the point in the body where essentially we'll take stitches from over here, stitches from over here, and put those on waste yarn. And when you put them on waste yarn, it's really just as simple as taking a scrap yarn. Like I would probably grab some worsted weight yarn. And how do they say it? I want to make sure I'm saying this correctly. It says slip the last 5, 6, 7, or 8 stitches onto a length of the underarm. So here I would take a scrap yarn. I would take a stitch or a tapestry needle and literally just slip those stitches onto scrap yarn. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. How many was I supposed to do? 8. I'm not at the right point, but let's say I did 8. So they're no longer on my needle. Now they're on scrap yarn. I always cut my scrap yarn. I leave a nice long piece of scrap yarn and I tie a knot in the 2 ends so that way I don't accidentally, well, I should have taken the tapestry needle out first so you get what I mean, but I tie a knot at the 2 ends together so that way you can't pull it out of that, okay? Now I have to pull it out because I have to get out my needle, but can you see what that does? So then in next week, after we put some of these stitches on a holder, those will meet up like so. Okay, I know it's hard to see because they're the same color right now, but they will meet up and that's where they will be joined together to begin working all the way in the round for the yoke. So it's at this point that you're working the body separately and the 2 sleeves separately, just like we did last week, but we are preparing our work so that way next week we can join it all together and start on the yoke portion of the sweater. What's really great by doing sweaters bottom up, we've done a good portion of our sweater knitting already by the time we get to the yoke. And yes, we will have a large number of stitches on our needles for the first several rounds of the yoke, but then as we begin decreasing down for the shaping, our knitting is going to go faster, faster, and faster because we're decreasing down the number of stitches, which will be very gratifying. Okay, so I know that there were not a lot of actual instructions as far as this is how you're going to do stuff in this video. It's a lot of talking and explaining what you're doing, why you're doing it, but that's what you need to do. And now you know where you need to add extra length, should you need to add extra length. If you feel like you need a bigger size, that's an entirely different situation because we're dealing with numbers that we need to hit when we get to the yoke. So I do not want you to change the number of stitches you have around your sleeves or around your body at this point. Okay, so if you want to add length, you can do that. If you want to add width, that's an entirely different conversation and I don't want to bombard you with that here in this video. Okay, all right, that's your homework for this week, you guys. Make sure you're sharing with us on social media. Use hashtag MarleyBird or hashtag YourInspirations so that way I can see your progress and smash your like button. I'm having a great time knitting this up with you. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye. Thanks so much for joining me on the Marley Bird YouTube channel. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to hit subscribe. I've put a link right over there, or you can watch a couple of the videos I've already selected for you right down there. If you want to follow me on social media, I've put my links right over there. You could have all Marley all the time. Bye guys.